What's up YouTube? Welcome to another episode of Scales 13. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you what it's like to own a blue tongue skink. So to start a description of what it's like to own a blue tongue skink, let's talk about when these animals are mostly active. So blue tongue skinks are mostly active during the day, making them a diurnal species. I wouldn't even consider this animal crepuscular in any type of way because once the sun starts to set, my blue tongue skink or the blue tongue skinks that I've dealt with in pet shops always seem to find their hide or burrow into the ground, and then you don't see them again until the early morning. Now it doesn't matter whether you have a northern blue tongue skink, an eastern, or some type of Indonesian blue tongue skink like the one I have here, which is my Taligo gigas gigas. All the blue tongue skinks are diurnal. So if you're a person who has time to view your animals and hang out in the reptile room during the day before the lights go out in the evening, this is the species for you, because that means you'll have a chance to actually observe this animal within its enclosure. Now, when it comes to their activity in general, these animals vary from individual to individual. Some of them are kind of like couch potatoes, where they'll lay around a lot, they'll stay in their burrows, out in their hides, and they don't really like to crawl around a lot in front of their owners unless it's time to eat. And then some of them crawl around in their enclosures all day and are quite active. Now, I can honestly say that this individual here, Panther, is a mixture of the two. It all depends on how I have his enclosure set up, what the environment is like, which will affect other blue tongue skinks as well. But I can tell with this guy, when the humidity levels are spiking, he likes to crawl around. If the temperatures are cooler, he's of course going to sleep more. But in general, if the enclosure is a decent temperature and it's a normal day, this animal is going to be out and about crawling quite a bit. Now, Panther doesn't really mind handling that much. He's not really puffing up too much. He's not freaking out like he used to. He actually used to be less tolerant of handling before I moved him to a larger enclosure. When he was in that 3-foot 40-gallon breeder, he didn't really tolerate handling as much. Now, he wouldn't bite, but he would hiss a lot and he would let me know, hey, I don't want to be held, leave me alone. He's actually much more tolerant of me handling him, doesn't hiss as much, and will even come up to me when I come to the front of the enclosure. So there's a little hint there. If you give your animal the environment that it requires, the more comfortable the animal might be with you, because the animal's not going to be as agitated. Now let's go into the husbandry of the blue tongue skink. So I'm going to be honest with you guys. The husbandry of a blue tongue skink is very easy for any keeper who is paying attention to achieve the proper environment for this animal to live in. Now, of course, with species like the northern blue tongue skink, which is the most captive bred, most popular blue tongue skink you'll find within the market, that one's going to be the easiest to deal with because it can deal with lower levels of humidity and higher levels of humidity. So since its tolerance for humidity has a wider range, that allows the keeper to have some wiggle room for the humidity levels, which won't negatively impact the skink as much as an animal, let's say like an Indonesian blue tongue skink. Now, of course, since I own an Indonesian blue tongue skink, this animal likes high humidity, hence why I have an enclosure with a ceiling top with no screen on it. I also use substrates that hold moisture to keep the humidity levels high. It's going to help the animal hydrate, it's going to help the animal shed well, and it's just going to give you a more comfortable animal living in an environment more similar to where these animals come from in the wild. Now, speaking on captive bred and wild caught animals, of course, Taligo gigas gigas is primarily a wild caught species. Now, a lot of people breed these animals are much cheaper in the market than your northern blue tongue skinks because, of course, northern blue tongue skinks come from Australia. Australia can't outsource any of its animals legally anymore to other countries because they want to protect their wildlife, which of course is commendable. But Indonesia doesn't have those same type of laws. So of course animals like this are still readily available as wild caught individuals. And of course my Taligo gigas gigas is of course no exception. But of course I've had Panther for the past 7 years. He's established, he has no parasites, he's seen the vet multiple times, and we've put a lot of time and energy into his care, and he is doing awesome. Now, of course, the majority of your husbandry, if you don't want to disturb your blue tongue skink, is going to happen during the day. So of course, as I said earlier, if you have time during the day, this is going to be a lot of time to have fun with your animal. So since these animals are omnivores, it's very easy to get your blue tongue skink a decent meal. So of course the vegetables and fruits that the animals will consume can be found in a grocery store. Any area where you have a local grocery store, or if you're one of those people who farms your own vegetables, they can eat a wide variety of different vegetables, and there's only a few vegetables that the animal cannot eat. And I think there are things that are not really that common that people don't normally have in an everyday American household, such as maybe like rhubarb or avocado, you know, things like that that are more like specialty items. But of course, like the spring mixes, the dark leafy greens, common fruits such as apples and bananas and blueberries, things of that nature, this animal can consume and are actually going to be a very healthy part of its diet. Now, of course, when it comes to proteins, these animals will eat insects, and I do suggest adding a few insects into the animal's diet to give it some variety and to give it some exercise when it's running around the enclosure. However, these animals don't necessarily need insects as its only protein source. You can offer these animals eggs. They can have multiple different types of high quality dog food that include beef, chicken, and even some fishes as well. The only fish that I've seen people use for the most part is salmon when it comes to feeding blue tongue skinks. It's not really highly suggested that you do make fish a normal protein source for the animal, of course, because of mercury levels and things of that nature. However, it is an option that you can feed your animal, but my suggestion is that you make sure you look at where the fish is sourced and look at the species of fish that you are thinking about feeding, so that way you just know the mercury level you might be using the animal to. So if you really want to feed fish to your blue tongue skink, be careful. The setup is very simple. All you need is a layer of substrate, maybe about 5-6 inches of substrate for the animal to completely bury its body in the substrate and be able to hide. You need a few hides, of course, to add extra security so the animal feels comfortable. A few plants for the animal to be able to dash around and hide. A water bowl on the cool side, of course, and a basking area, and then your enclosure is complete. You don't need to bother with any type of vertical setups like large branches that are a few feet above the ground, and these backgrounds, which of course a 3D background would look very cool in a blue tongue skink's enclosure. You're not going to get the animal climbing on it and getting a whole lot of exercise out of that enclosure, because these animals are of course a burrowing species. This animal's only going to climb on large stones and fallen trees in the wild. You aren't going to see a blue tongue skink scaling up in the trees in the canopy like a chameleon or any other species of lizard, because these guys literally don't have the anatomical abilities to be great climbers. They have very short limbs. Sorry, buddy. They of course have very short limbs, and they don't really have the claws that are long enough to grip the side of a tree and then climb straight up. They're also very heavy bodied as well. And of course, last but not least, let's talk about how easy it is to handle the blue tongue skink. So for individuals such as Panther here, I've had this blue tongue skink for about 7 years. So he's very established and he's used to me and my presence and my touch as a keeper, but it's always going to depend on the individual. Now, of course, since this is a primarily wild caught species, some individuals just do not want to be handled and will not tame down. However, I can say the majority of blue tongue skinks that you can find in the pet trade are going to be pretty tolerant when it comes to handling, especially northerns and especially individuals that are captive bred, which is the majority of the species that you find that don't come out of Indonesia. Now, I hope you guys liked this video. This was really fun to make. I always wanted to make a what it's like video for the blue tongue skink because I feel as though these guys are not looked at in the hobby enough. I remember a few years ago, blue tongue skinks blew up with TC Houston and everybody in the, it's my daughter, that everybody in the hobby wanted a blue tongue skink. But now it seems like they're kind of like dying off as far as being one of the more popular species, and people seem to be getting more into anoles and monitor lizards and things like that. So if you guys want a large lizard that is easily handleable, I would highly suggest getting a blue tongue skink as a pet. Everyone have a great day. Peace.